At the 2022 NCAA tournament, Riley Gaines was beaten by a narrow margin for the championship by Leah Thomas. Thomas previously competed at the University of Pennsylvania men's team. Only when he identified as a woman and joined the women's team did Thomas begin to win awards. Amazing. No male, regardless of age, sport division you're playing at, should compete against women, Riley Gaines said. I believe that if you were born with a Y chromosome of any capacity, you should not be allowed to compete against someone who has two X's as chromosomes. There are advantages that will never go away. Gaines is suing the NCAA for discriminating against female athletes by allowing males to compete in women's sports. Seems pretty simple. She said it appeared that the NCAA was prioritizing the transgender athletes over others. On her weekly podcast, Gaines for Girls, she talks to scientists, elite athletes, and those affected by cultural issues. Her book, Swimming Against the Current, Fighting for Common Sense in a World That's Lost Its Mind, was released in May and is nearly on the bestseller list and is available, as we said, after we sign up for everything here. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Riley Gaines.
Thank you. That's so kind. Gosh. Thank you, guys. What a beautiful little town Chautauqua is. It's like movie-esque. It feels like just driving up here that time like paused right here. So I could not be more grateful to be here. Certainly feel more welcomed and supported than I did even the last time I was in New York, actually at Buffalo. I spoke at the University of Buffalo, where, as you could probably imagine, there were multiple arrests made of students and community members who admitted to being paid to protest me, but again, arrested for trying to kill me. So I couldn't be more grateful to be in this room with you guys. Certainly feel more welcomed here than I did at San Francisco a few months back, which was my first mistake going to San Francisco. But I went there to share a very similar message. It was actually at San Francisco State University, but I was naive to believe that these students and community members would come with an open mind and the willingness to have their hearts softened, because they did not. They came with pitchforks and fire. And upon delivering my message, it was a classroom setting, so a similar forum, right? A podium at the front of the room, many chairs in the room. Upon delivering my message, a group of protesters, hundreds of them, rush in through the back, through the door. They turn off the lights. They rush to the front. I'm ambushed. I'm being pushed. I'm being shoved. I'm being punched in the face by these men wearing dresses, which, fortunately for me, their punches really don't hurt that bad. But they ended up, ultimately, they held me for ransom for 4 or 5 hours, demanding that if I wanted to make it home to see my family safely again, I had to pay them money. All the while, okay, you might be wondering, where are the police? Guys, it's San Francisco. The police were being held for ransom with me. And so I'm looking at the officers, 5, 6 of them in this room, looking at them. Pretty sure we're being held against our will. Pretty sure we call that kidnapping. Isn't there something you can do? To which they said, no. There's nothing we can do. We're not allowed to do anything because we're not allowed to be seen as anything other than an ally to this community, or else we'll lose our jobs. The same community who's on the other side of the door calling these officers racist pigs for protecting a white girl like me. Anyways, it's like midnight at this point. The dean of students shows up, starts negotiating with the students how much I owe each of them to leave, which the price they agreed upon was $10 each, which makes me mad because I think I'm worth more than $10. But anyways, eventually I was able to get out of there. But the next day, the vice president of student affairs at the university, her name is Dr. Jamila Moore, she sent out a university-wide email to all of the faculty, all of the professors, the entire student body. And in this email, she said, "We are so proud of our brave students for handling Riley Gaines in the manner that they did. We know how deeply traumatic her presence is on this campus, and so here are some counseling resources for you guys. Take the day off of school. Just know that we see you, we love you, we hear you, and we stand with you." Nowhere in this email did it say that we condemn violence against women for that matter. Nowhere in this email did it say we uphold our First Amendment rights and the freedom of speech. And actually, just recently, the lieutenant who was in the room being held for ransom with me, actually just emailed me and said there was no evidence anywhere that any of this even happened. Despite what a quick Google search would show you, there are ample amounts of audio, video, eyewitness testimony. He said no charges can be pressed, not to the individual students, not to the university, not to the police department for failing at their most basic duties in ensuring my safety. Not that you needed another example, especially here in the state of New York, to highlight how our justice system is two-tiered. Certainly feel more welcome here than I did even before Congress a few months back. I've testified before Congress and the Senate many times, which it is unfathomable to me that a 23, I just recently turned 24, but 23 at the time, 23 years old, recent college graduate, college swimmer at that, has to go to D.C. to sit in front of Congress, the beating heart of the American Republic, and explain to them that men and women are different. And then to be on the other side of this table and watch as they have these like super confused looks on their faces. But that's what I was there to do, ultimately urging the Biden administration to halt with their illegal administrative rewrite of Title IX, which clearly they did not listen to my pleas. But I'm sitting there, it was the Oversight and Accountability, one of the subcommittees, and the ranking member of that committee, Democrat from Pennsylvania, Representative Lee, Summer Lee, one of those pesky squad members. She starts to read her opening monologue in front of the hearing, the committee. And the first words that come out of her mouth, she says, "I can't believe that I'm forced to sit here and listen to her transphobic bigotry." And my heart broke, honestly. I didn't feel angry, I didn't feel mad. I felt entirely demoralized, disheartened. Again, a sitting member of Congress doesn't try to dissuade from my stance with logic or facts or reasoning or common sense or lived experience or science, what happened to follow the science. No, instead she resorts to name calling. And so it's my turn to read my testimony, and I read it, and I didn't even mean to say this last part. It accidentally just came out of my mouth. But I looked at her, and I said, "Representative Lee, if my testimony makes me transphobic, then understand, by your own logic, your opening monologue makes you a misogynist," which sent the hearing into a tailspin. It was as if she had never actually, or at least accurately, heard the word misogynist used in a sentence. Of course, her counsel comes running over, her staff comes running over, they're pulling up their phones. I literally think they looked up the definition, because about 60 seconds later, she raises her hand and she says, "I want her words removed from the record on the grounds of engaging in personalities," which Marjorie Taylor Greene was in that hearing, and so she buzzes in and she says, "I would call a man posing as a woman someone who's engaging in personalities." And then it's like the Jerry Springer show. I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? People are like jumping over tables. I'm so sorry. But my thought process in those brief moments, in the time where she read her statement, I got to read my testimony, let's be very clear about the stand that I have taken. It is not a stand that is against anything. Often it's labeled as anti-whatever. But again, to be very clear, the stand that I have taken is a stand that is for something. It's pro-transparency, it is pro-safety, it's pro-privacy, it's pro-equal opportunity. The stand that I have taken is pro-woman. But why is it that being pro-woman is immediately deemed anti-trans? And okay, if that's the case, then wouldn't being anti-trans, or I guess pro-trans, inherently be anti-woman? And what do we call someone who's anti-woman? We call them a misogynist. So let it be known, congressional record still stands. There were no grounds to have my words removed. Someone actually even sent me a picture of her Wikipedia page the other day, and at the very bottom of it, it says, as of whatever day, Representative Lee is a misogynist, which I think is incredible. So, again, just to reiterate how excited I am to be in this room with you guys. And it's super cool to see a bunch of young people here, too. That's revitalizing. That's what this is about. So very excited to see you guys. But a little bit about me. I graduated from University of Kentucky last year. I met a couple Kentucky grads in here. Graduated from University of Kentucky, where I got my degree in human health sciences and health law. I was in dental school after college, actually set to specialize in endodontics, which is root canals, weirdly enough. It would have been really safe, really secure, really easy for me to essentially ride off into the sunset. I'd gotten married in my senior year of college. It would have been really easy for me to pursue the life that I had planned for myself. But I realized that the quickest way to make God laugh in your face is to make plans for yourself, because he very clearly had different plans for me. A little bit about my swimming. Started swimming when I was 4 years old, graduated when I was 22. Dedicated 18 years of my life to my sport, which I don't have to explain this. I talk to so many athletes, right? Parents of athletes, grandparents of athletes, some of you former athletes, some of you probably very former athletes. You know what this is like. You know the time, you know the hours, the dedication, the sacrifices that you have to make to compete at and ultimately be successful at the highest level. And I was no different. Flash forward to college. I'm sorry, I'm biased. The SEC is the best conference. I knew I was going to stay in the SEC. There was never a doubt in my mind. My dad, he's an SEC Hall of Famer. My mom, she played softball. My oldest sister went to Ole Miss. She played softball. My brother, he's in college. He plays football now. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I did not admittedly know I wanted to go to Kentucky. I thought the only things that came from Kentucky were like meth and Mountain Dew, which neither of which am I interested in. But now I found out they also have horses and bourbon, and I like those things. So, went to Kentucky. Couldn't have been a better place for me. Flash forward. Dealt with COVID. That was miserable, to say the least. Being a college athlete, I would say being a college student, really being a human during the time of COVID was miserable in terms of the contact tracing and the social distancing and the mandatory vaccines and the mask mandates, which how many of you have seen a swimmer in the water wearing a mask? No, but they certainly tried. We essentially waterboarded ourselves every day. That was my sophomore year into my junior year, really affected the rest of our collegiate career. But junior year, I ended up concluding my junior season. This is when I won my first individual SEC title. This is when University of Kentucky won its first ever SEC title as a team in program history. And ultimately this year, I placed 7th in the country, which I was proud of. It wasn't my best time. I knew I was capable of more, but top 8, you're an All-American. It's a pretty high honor. But it was right then and there that I placed 7th in the nation, that I set a goal for my senior year to win a national title, which would, of course, mean becoming the fastest woman in the country in my respective event. And so, senior year rolls around. I'm right on pace to achieve this goal. About midway through my senior year, I'm ranked 3rd in the nation in the 200 free, trailing the girl in 2nd by a few 100ths of a second, a girl I knew very well. But the swimmer who was leading the nation, by body lengths, might I add, was a swimmer that none of us had ever heard of before. Not me, not my coaches, not my teammates, none of us. This is the first time we became aware of a swimmer named Leah Thomas. Looking up the name, there's no history of this person until that season. None of it made sense. Scratching my head, we continued to stay in the dark until an article came out disclosing very briefly that Leah Thomas is actually Will Thomas and swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania before deciding to switch to the women's team. I was shocked, to say the least, when I read this. Naturally, again, we all were. Because for all we knew up until this point, for all we knew, we hadn't seen any photos of this person, keep in mind, or else things probably would have been a little more clear. But for all we knew, this was a senior from UPenn, leading the nation by body lengths in events ranging from the 100 freestyle, which is a sprint, all of the freestyle events in between through the mile, which if you're not very apt on swimming, I mean, think about that last piece in terms of your Olympic runners. It's like saying your best 200-meter runner is your best marathon runner. It doesn't happen, but that's what we were seeing in this person. And then we found out it was actually just a man, and it all clicked. It was kind of, I said, of course we were shocked, but really for me it was this overwhelming sense of relief. Like, oh, duh, makes sense now. I thought to myself, there's no way the NCAA will allow Leah Thomas, formerly Will Thomas, to compete with the women at our national championships. But lo and behold, the NCAA, they saw no problem with this. They announced about 3 weeks before our national championships in March of 2022 that Thomas's participation in the women's category was a non-negotiable, meaning there was nothing that we could do. There was no questions that we could ask. As female athletes, there was no concerns that we could raise. We were told we quite literally had to accept this with a smile on our face. And so I got to personally witness and really feel the effect that this infringement, or what I would call an injustice, had on myself and my teammates and my competitors. I don't claim to speak for every single girl on that pool deck, but I do claim to speak for the overwhelming majority of us. Because I can wholeheartedly attest to the tears that I saw, not just from the moms in the stands watching as their daughters are being obliterated in the sport that they once loved, but the tears from the girls who placed 9th or 17th and missed out on being named an All-American by one place. And I can wholeheartedly attest to the extreme discomfort in the locker room when you turn around and there's a 6'4", 22-year-old man, fully intact, fully naked, fully exposing himself, inches away from where you were simultaneously fully undressed. And I can wholeheartedly attest to the whispers, because that's what they were. They were whispers of anger and frustration from those girls who, just like myself, had worked our entire lives to get to this meet. That first day of competition was the 500 freestyle, which is not an event that I typically do, and so I watched on the side of the pool as Thomas swam to a national title, beating out Olympians, beating out American record holders. Keep in mind, these aren't scrubs. No, they're the most impressive and accomplished female swimmers this world has ever seen, and he beat them all by body lengths. He became the first man to win a Division I NCAA women's title. Yeah, trailblazer. But the second day of competition was the 200 free, which is the event that he and I competed against each other in. And so, of course, we get on the block and we dive off and we swim 8 laps of freestyle, touch the wall at the end. I look up at the scoreboard, and almost impossibly enough, we had gone the exact same time down to the 100th of a second, meaning we had tied. Which, you know, when you're racing for 1 minute and 40 seconds, it's pretty rare. 2, it's embarrassing for a 6'4" man. He couldn't even beat me. Anyways, we get out of the water, we go behind the awards podium. The NCAA official looks at both Thomas and myself, Thomas, who's towering over me. And this official says, "Great job, you two, but you tied. And we only have 1 trophy, so we're going to give that trophy to Leah. Sorry, Riley, you don't get one." My heart rate was still high, having just competed. My adrenaline was still pumping, and so the first thing that I thought ended up being the first thing that I said, and the first thought that I had was, isn't this everything that Title IX was passed to prevent from happening? What do you mean you're going to give the trophy to the man and the women's 200 free? He tried a couple different excuses. We're just doing this in chronological order. That was the first thing he said. So I said, okay, do you mean alphabetical? Because G comes before T. Otherwise, what are you being chronological about? We tied. He didn't have an answer. And it was at this point, honestly, his face changed. Okay, like he looked sad. I could tell he didn't even believe what he was about to say, but I appreciate his honesty because he looked at me and he said, Riley, I am so sorry, but we have been advised as an organization that when photos are being taken, it's crucial that the trophy's in Leah's hands. You can pose with this one, but you have to give yours back. Leah takes a trophy home. You don't get one. End of story. And let me tell you what, that was the moment when, of course, all season, we knew the unfair competition was wrong. We knew the locker room was wrong. We knew the silencing that we were facing from our universities. We knew all of that was wrong. But it wasn't until this official reduced everything we had worked our entire lives for down to a photo op to validate the feelings and the identity of a man at the expense of our own. That's when I was no longer willing to wait. That's what I was doing. I naively was waiting for someone else to say something because I thought someone else would. I thought, this isn't my job. It's a coach's job to stand up for us. Surely a coach will stand up for us. Surely someone within the NCAA, someone with political power, some other swimmer, someone's dad, quite frankly, would come down there and yank this man out of our locker rooms. But it was in that moment I realized, I remember vividly, standing on the podium, holding this trophy I know I have to give back, sharing my placement with a man, and it hit me. How in the world could I expect someone to stand up for me if I wasn't even willing to stand up for myself? This has to come from us as women, as female athletes. So it was... So again, that on top of the locker room, which if I had to see it, you guys at least have to hear about it. We were not forewarned that we would be sharing this changing space. There was no prior acknowledgement. There was no ways that we could have made other arrangements for ourselves if this was something that we felt uncomfortable with. No, again, and put yourself, actually, put your daughters, your granddaughters, better yet, in our shoes. You're putting these suits on, okay? If you know anything about swimming, they're skin tight, they're paper thin. It takes at least 20 minutes to really poke and prod yourself into these suits, 20 minutes of which you're fully exposed. You've got your back turned, and all of a sudden, you hear a man's voice in that locker room. And you turn around, and you quite literally have to look up because this person is towering over everyone else, and you see a man taking off his women's swimsuit, fully exposed, fully intact, just out in the open for everyone to see. Again, inches away from where you were fully undressed. Of course, it's awkward, it's embarrassing, it's uncomfortable. It was innate for every girl in that changing space to cover themselves, whether it was with their hands or their towels or their clothes, and to get out of the locker room as quickly as they could. But really, I think the best words to describe how we felt, again, the general consensus of how we felt, I mean, it was an utter violation. It felt like betrayal. And it was traumatic. And not even necessarily traumatic for me because of what we were forced to see or how we were forcibly exploited and non-consensually exploited. It was traumatic for me to know just how easy it was for those people who created these policies to totally dismiss our rights to privacy without even a second thought, without even bare minimum forewarning us. So again, and I briefly alluded to the silencing, but I think it's an important piece in understanding how this topic, the gender ideology movement as a whole, I would say a lot of the cultural chaos that we see, it's transcended beyond just the subject matter, and it really has become an infringement on our First Amendment rights and our freedom of speech. At my school, I was forced to go to mandatory sensitivity training. Didn't work, but they brought in an outside professional, whatever that means, who sat me down, a 21-year-old senior in college at the time, taught me how to use she, her pronouns. I was told, you'll never get a job. You'll never get into grad school. Riley, and don't you want to be a dentist? You can never be that if you speak up. Your employer is going to look you up, and they're going to see that you're a transphobe. And you don't want that, do you? No, you're going to lose all your friends. You'll lose your scholarship. And oh yeah, Riley, speaking of that scholarship, remember you signed that. And when you signed that, you gave away your rights to speak in your own personal capacity. Remember who you represent. Remember whose name is across your chest and across your cap, because it's not yours, it's ours. And understand, Riley, we have already taken your stance for you. That's what they said to us. Thomas's teammates, they had to go to mandatory weekly LGBTQ education meetings to learn about how just by being cisgender, they were oppressing Thomas. 16 of these girls sent an email to their administration expressing their discomfort in the locker room specifically, to which I kid you not, I have a screenshot of the university's response, UPenn. They responded back and said, if you feel uncomfortable seeing male genitalia, here are some counseling resources that you should seek in an attempt to re-educate yourselves. And counseling resources provided by none other than the campus LGBTQ Education Center. They even went as far, UPenn, to tell Thomas's teammates that if they did speak up about this, and any harm whatsoever were to come towards Thomas's way, physical, emotional, mental, self-inflicted for that matter, they said if any harm comes towards Thomas's way, then understand it is solely your responsibility. And that would make you responsible for a potential death, and that would make you a murderer. And you don't want to be a murderer, do you? They would say, you don't want to have blood on your hands. No, so I suggest you be kind, and I suggest you be inclusive. Let that really sink in, what they told these girls, 18, 19, 20-year-old girls. They told them they would be murderers if they advocated for fair play and privacy in areas of undressing. And believe it or not, that's effective. I was in SUNY Cortland recently, and I saw this sign on the university's bathroom stall. Only in the women's stall. I was with my husband. I had him go check the men's. Of course, this wasn't in the men's room, probably because a man would tear this sign down in 1 second because it's the dumbest thing I've ever read. But it says, do you feel like someone is using the wrong bathroom? Don't stare at them. Don't challenge them. Don't insult them. Don't purposefully make them feel uncomfortable. Do respect their privacy. Do respect their identity. And do carry on with your day. Transgender and non-binary and male individuals, you have every right to be here in the women's bathroom. That's right here. Not that, again, you probably need examples of understanding how this has impacted the world around you. But again, a brief, believe it or not, that's the in short version of how I got here. But more importantly than how is why. And it's a question we should all be asking ourselves. Why, first and foremost, why is this happening? Which as a Christian, I feel entirely confident in answering why this is happening, because the Bible tells us why this is happening. We're told, Paul warns us actually, in Acts and Romans and different places, he tells us that we will reach a point where these spiritual battles intensify, where darkness is seen as light, where bitter is seen as sweet, and where evil is seen as moral. And it's undeniable that that's not where we're at right now. And look, that's not me saying that I think people who, thank you. That's not me saying I think people who identify as trans are evil. No, I don't think that. But deceit is evil, and manipulation is evil, and lying and affirming delusions, that's evil. And who's the father of lies? Who moves through deceit and in darkness? God's opposition does. But from a worldly perspective, in answering why is this a topic I feel so fiercely and so passionately about defending? Let's be, again, very clear on this. This is so much broader than just women's sports. This is so much more than me not being able to hold and take home the $5 production little dinky trophy. This is so much more than just that. The premise of the gender ideology movement is that we are denying objective truth. We're denying biblical truth, but we're denying objective truth, biological reality, a reality and a truth we have never struggled to understand in the nearly 250 years we've been established as a country, and certainly much longer than that, that being man and woman. But now we live in a time, we have an administration in the White House right now who says the words are interchangeable. Male, female, boy, girl, mother, father, sex, gender identity. It's all synonymous. It's all the same thing. And if you will deny that, there is no limits. There are no limits. Your credibility has been entirely compromised on every single topic. I will not believe a word that comes out of your mouth on anything if you say that men can become women and vice versa. But that's where we are right now. If you look at it holistically, right, the denial of truth, the shift in language that we've seen, right, it's no longer mother, it's no longer female. No, it's now like cervix haver or uterus owner or menstruator or bleeder or chest feeder or birthing person, birth giver, egg producer. That's the one I think is so funny because that's what Mr. Rachel Levine, our Assistant Secretary of Health, calls women, is egg producers, which again is comical because by his own standard, he wouldn't be a woman. Nonetheless, so we've seen this shift in language, even the phrasing, the verbiage of biological woman. I've got such a problem with. I didn't at first. I didn't see the harm in it, right? Like, thought it was necessary in making the distinction between Thomas and myself. I'm a biological woman. Thomas is a biological male. Sitting there one day, having taken many upper-level math courses in college, and sitting there, I'm like, if this was an algebra equation, wouldn't those words just like cancel out? Why are we saying that? And it hit me what we were doing. We're playing their game when we do that. When we add that prerequisite, that prefix of biological, you're subconsciously admitting that there's an unbiological alternative to being a male or female, woman, man, girl, boy, and there's not. God created the only distinction we will ever need when he created man and woman. On top of, right again, the denial of truth, the shift in language, the breakdown of faith. We used to be a country that proudly stood by the slogan, the motto of one nation under God, or in God we trust. The breakdown of families pinning parents and kids against each other. The breakdown of our freedoms, such as the freedom of speech. The propaganda that we are seeing spread throughout the media, certainly on both sides. Preying on our most vulnerable, that being men and women. If you look at all of this, plus other things, it really only points in one direction, and that direction is Marxism. And you talk to someone from China or Russia or North Korea or Germany or Cuba or the Czech Republic or Brazil or Venezuela or any of these countries that currently or have at one point embraced this communist, Marxist, socialist regime, and they'll tell you that it's a slippery slope, and it's a slippery slope that by the hands and feet of our own leaders, we are actively being led down. Which all sounds grim and it sounds chilling, and again, maybe from a worldly perspective, sure, but why I'm able to do what I do with a smile on my face and an incredibly light heart is because we already know who wins the war. Actually, correction, the war has already been won, and that is all the reassurance that I need. But I will say I feel more hopeful now than I have at any point over these past 2 years or so. 24 states have now enacted some sort of fairness in women's sports bill, ultimately not allowing people to compete on sports teams that don't align with their sex. 8 states, New York is not one of those, in case you were wondering. There are 8 states that have now codified and defined the word woman in law, which I can't even believe we have to do, but shouldn't be that much of a surprise. We have a sitting Supreme Court justice who can't even answer the question of what is a woman because she claims she's not a biologist. Guess what? I'm not a veterinarian, but I know what a dog is. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And it's no surprise that this is the same Supreme Court justice who recently, in an interview, She said she felt like our First Amendment rights were hamstringing the government. Precisely. That is precisely what they are supposed to do. That's why we have the Bill of Rights. And if our government can't understand or abide by that, that's precisely why we have the Second Amendment. So no shock there. But 8 states have defined this word woman, which is great news. We now have 26 states that are suing the Biden administration for their illegal administrative rewrite of Title IX. We have seen a preliminary injunction issued in 14 of those states, meaning when it goes into effect on August 1st, 14 of these states, including my home state of Tennessee, do not have to comply. I've mentioned Title IX several times, and I've mentioned this rewrite. Title IX, I'm sure many of you got to reap the benefits of Title IX. It wasn't that long ago that it was enacted, 52 years ago in 1972. Federal civil rights law that prevents sex-based discrimination on any educational program that receives federal funding. The Biden administration has taken this 37 words, only 37 words in its original implementation, rewrote this policy, created a new proposal that's now almost 500,000 words, 1,577 pages long from this very brief paragraph. That should tell you everything that you need to know. But in short, what they've done is equate sex and gender identity, say they're the same thing, again, interchangeable words, meaning men can take academic and athletic scholarships away from women. Men can be housed in dorm rooms with women. Men have full access to bathrooms, locker rooms, changing spaces, not just on college campuses, but also at your local YMCA, your Young Men's Christian Association, any program that receives federal funding from the government. They have to adhere to this. Your speech is compelled. You would be forced, a student, a faculty member, a professor, someone who goes to the YMCA, you would be forced to use preferred pronouns, biologically incorrect pronouns. And if you don't adhere to this, under this new rewrite, you would be guilty and charged with sexual harassment. No, not the man parading around your locker room. No, to President Biden, that's considered brave. He said it many times. These are the most brave and inspiring people I've ever met. But you calling a spade is grounds for sexual harassment. We'll see a vote actually this week in Congress. Representative Mary Miller introduced a Congressional Review Act to combat, again, this illegal rewrite. So hopefully, I imagine it will pass the House entirely on party lines, and I imagine it will get killed in the Senate. But nonetheless, be watching out for that. Doing everything we can at the federal level to combat this. I think most importantly, a new administration in the White House in November. That's how we win that back. But anyways, to wrap up, before we get to the Q&A, which I'm very excited for, just to give you guys a little bit of encouragement. First and foremost, it's to trust God's calling for you, right? Like I said, this is never something that I wanted. This is never something that I felt prepared for. I never had to take any government courses. I never had to take history past 9th grade of high school, which is incredibly concerning. I knew we had 3 branches of government. Didn't know what they did. I still don't know what they do. I don't even think they know what they do. My public speaking courses in college, my face turned the color of a tomato. By no means did I feel prepared for this. But I now understand, and I learned this pretty quickly. I was wrong in assuming that God calls those who are prepared. That's not what he does at all. No, he equips those who he calls. And if he calls you, if he brings you to something, he will certainly bring you through it. So trust his calling for you. Secondly, it's to not wait until you're directly impacted to take a firm and unapologetic stand for the truth, which is exactly what I did. I waited until it personally and negatively impacted me before I saw this as a worthwhile cause. Like I said, I just thought, not my problem. Yeah, sure, it's happening. Yeah, I knew it was wrong. I never once thought it was right. But I figured the NCAA, they'll briefly fix this. It won't happen again. I was so wrong in assuming that. I could sit here for hours and tell you just right here in this state what's going on. So don't do what I did. Don't wait until you're directly impacted. Because if each and every one of us did that, it's far too late. We spend a lot of our time talking about the national election, federal elections, who's going to be in the White House. Again, important things. But far more important than what's happening at the federal level is what's happening at the local level. And it's something we all have the power to control. Be mindful of what's going on in school boards around you. Do your research before voting for state senator, your state representative, any elected position. Just because someone has an R by their name does not mean they're on our side. So get involved in that way. I think all very important things that we have the power to control. I'll finish by saying my favorite Bible verse, which is Romans 8:18. It's always been my favorite. It's been my favorite since I was little. Romans 8 is my favorite book of the Bible, or chapter of the Bible. And it's for our present sufferings aren't worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed in us. And I love this verse when I was younger because I applied it to swimming. And right, the present sufferings, it was the time, the hours, the practice. But it paled in comparison to the feeling of winning a championship, breaking a record, going a best time. But let me tell you, that verse is so much more applicable in my life now, right? The present sufferings. Okay, sure, it's the name calling. It's the petty personal attacks. People saying, well, your extensions look bad. I'm like, this is my real hair, so thank you. That's kind of a compliment. People showing up at my house, whatever it is, sure. Pales in comparison when you know what you're fighting for, but more importantly, who you're fighting for. So again, I appreciate all of you guys being here, and I'm excited to answer some questions.
Riley Gaines.
Thank you.
Let me start out, not that I want to bring any publicity further to Leah Thomas, but would you bring us up to date on 2 sentences as to what he is doing now?
Yes. So he is in law school, which, like, of course, why would he not be in law school, fighting to become a civil rights lawyer? But after the whole NCAA championships, FINA and World Aquatics, the international governing body of swimming, they created a new policy that said, if you've gone through male puberty, you can't compete in the women's category, which is not a perfect policy by any means, because it's insinuating if you've transitioned by the age of 12, then you can. So certainly not perfect. But they were the first organization to take a bold first step in prioritizing fairness over inclusion. They even created a third category at elite level competitions. So Thomas or people who identified as trans or non-binary could compete and succeed. But Thomas said this is not satisfactory. If I can't trample on women in the process, I don't want to compete. And so he sued World Aquatics for a spot on the U.S. women's Olympic team, to which they actually just ruled maybe 2 weeks ago that Thomas's case has no standing and he cannot compete on the U.S. women's Olympic team. So a win. I can't believe we have to applaud that. It's essentially like we're applauding a judge ruling that the sun sets in the west. But nonetheless, it is a win. So
Yes, thank you for the presentation and thank you for your courage. That was my question about the recent case. And I was just wondering now, who represents Leah Thomas? Who is behind, who pays the legal fees?
So, as you probably know, I'm not entirely certain on the case of Leah Thomas, but again, what I have learned about this movement as a whole, it's heavily funded by groups like the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. It's heavily funded by George Soros and that money. As I said, even here at Buffalo, they're paid, they're given gift cards, they're given money to come and protest. They didn't even know what they were protesting. Half their signs didn't even make sense. They were reused from other events that they were paid to protest. So a lot of it is from outside organizations that have deep pockets and can fund a lot of this stuff.
Being a dad of a daughter that was a pretty good youth runner and high school runner, good enough to earn a full scholarship, athletic scholarship to Ohio State, this whole subject just makes me sick, especially when I hear about a person, a transgender by the name of Veronica Garcia, who recently won the 400 meter in Washington State. And from what I read, didn't have to take any drugs at all, hormone therapy, anything, just as a male lined up and won the race by a second. So my question is a little different. Why does the NAI see this different than the NCAA?
Yes. To your point, yeah, there's been 5 states that have, just in the sport of track and field, that have awarded a male a women's state title, high school state title. That's 10% of the states, you guys. With Washington, Oregon, yeah, over there being some of them. But the NAIA, what he's referring to, the NAIA, which is another national collegiate governing body, but it's essentially like the NCAA's little brother. They just recently, in a unanimous vote, 25-0, ruled that they wouldn't allow for men to compete on women's teams and vice versa at any NAIA school. So now, why is the NCAA pandering to this? Why do they say this is a complex issue when it's quite literally the most simple fix of all time? What it boils down to is money, I think. I think groups like the NCAA, companies like Bud Light or Target or even Tractor Supply, who recently lost $2 billion in a week, they don't follow red or blue, they follow green, and I think the NCAA is no different. They want to sit on their hands, they don't want to be responsible, they don't want to be accountable. I think the NCAA is thrilled that we're suing them because it gives them an out. It gives them a reason to say, oh, hey, well, we're not creating this policy, someone else is forcing our hand. That's what they want. They're weak-kneed, morally bankrupt, spineless cowards, the lot of them. So.
Other than that,
One more question. If you really believe what Leah Thomas says, that he doesn't swim on a women's team to get a leg up on anybody, it's not about money, it's just about expressing themselves. If that's really the motive of transgenders, why is this seems to be in a non-revenue, initially only in non-revenue sports? You don't see it in basketball or football, obviously football. But in non-revenue sports, as you know, because of Title IX, it's much harder for a male to get a scholarship. So how many male basketball players do you know that are on scholarship, that are doing great, are going to their coach saying, you know what, I'm doing great here, I got a full scholarship, but I want to play in the women's team because I want to express myself?
Yeah, none of them. Could you imagine someone like Jonathan Isaac, for example? He just signed an $84 million renewal contract with the Orlando Magic, NBA player, comparative to Caitlin Clark, who makes $70,000. That's what she makes. You would never see that. But honestly, I think it's going to take a less than average man who could never ever compete even at a D1 school, making it to the highest level in women's basketball before people really start to open their eyes. They see what's happening in swimming or track or smaller sports like disc golf, for example, this issue, cycling. The issue of allowing men into those sports is, rampant. Virtually every international level award is won by a man in these smaller sports. But to your point, no one really bats an eye to it because it's just swimming. Who really cares? I've heard that in state houses where they're like, it's just middle school swimming. What an utterly regressive and utterly misogynistic approach to take. I think we need to see it infiltrate, unfortunately, into bigger sports before more, larger revenue sports before people start to see a need to curb the issue.
Riley, cheering you on when I hear you in public saying that it is unfair and unjust. Today, I heard the reason why. You articulated that very well. When did you discover the why, and how important is it in this debate we're having in society today?
Yeah, it took me a while. Like I said, I was really hung up. I found out who Leah Thomas was in November of 2021, didn't compete against him until March of 2022. So in those 4 or so months, I knew about him. I didn't find it, like I said, I didn't find it my job to say something. And then I was impacted, and I did. But it took me a while it didn't take me a while to speak out. It was the next day after the race, I said something. But in doing that, I was so nervous. I was so apologetic. Virtually every interview I did, every person I talked to, I seemingly apologized before I said anything. Like, I don't want to hurt, I said her feelings. And I'll tell you when I changed my mind on the pronoun stuff. I was doing an interview, and someone was asking me about the locker room, and I'm so embarrassed I even said this. The phrase, her penis, came out of my mouth. And I was like, what am I saying? Did I just say her penis? Like, did I just say that? Oh my gosh, like how much was I abandoning my gut instincts in doing that? It pained me to say that, and that's when I realized no more pandering, no more playing the game, because there is no compromise that's enough for the other side. And to the point, this isn't about respect, it's not about kindness, it's not about empathy. I can be an empathetic person. I think I have more empathy for Leah Thomas than those who advocate Democrats in the U.S. House do. No, it is loving to tell the truth. That is what love is. That is how you display empathy and compassion. It's not compassionate to ask a young girl to undress in front of a man. That's not what compassion is. And it's not inclusive to ask girls to smile and step aside and allow these men onto our podiums. No, that's exclusive. And it's exclusive to the very female athletes, the very women who Title IX was passed to protect. But in terms of understanding this as the broader picture here, and seeing the threats, the risk, the trajectory of where we are going, that took a while, and I'm still learning every day. Looking at whether it's this issue, whether it's the border, whatever cultural issue that has really plaguing this country, there's an underlying theme in them. Again, this compared to COVID, the same tactics they use in college to keep us quiet or to force us into submitting. They said, Riley, you're the team captain. You have to get the vaccine. You're going to be hurting your teammates if you don't, and you don't want to be responsible for hurting them. That's the same thing they said my senior year in a totally unrelated topic, to which I learned how to stand up for myself my sophomore, junior year during all the COVID stuff when I said, no, you can't make me get the vaccine. I'm young, I'm healthy. I'd already had COVID. I have the antibodies. To my knowledge, that was the best and most natural form of immunity. You can't make me get that. They said, well, Riley, you won't be able to travel. The same emotional blackmail. And I said, okay. No, I didn't get the vaccine, and yes, I got to travel to every single meet. Just manipulation, and I learned the tactics. So that was a long roundabout answer, but...
I have a very practical question for you. I'm from a very small school district. We graduate around 40 to 50 students a year, and our fall sports are field hockey and soccer. We certainly couldn't afford to have 2 soccer teams or 2 field hockey teams. So historically, girls have played soccer, and usually 6-7 girls play every year on the men's team. Very rarely has there been a man play on the men's or on the field hockey team. So in Pennsylvania, there was legislation recently introduced that hasn't moved that would say you have to either declare your sport female, male, or co-ed. So if our little school would say we're co-ed, they couldn't participate in the league because there isn't any other co-ed teams. And usually, several of these girls every year go on to get a scholarship. So is there a way to maybe not throw the baby out with the bathwater in some exceptions where boys and girls might compete together, like Greenwood High School, Pennsylvania soccer team?
I think if we are prioritizing safety number 1, fairness number 2, I think it's hard to make exceptions in that way. I think by no means am I saying, in my stand that I have taken, am I saying that co-ed teams should not be a thing. I certainly believe, really what we're advocating for is transparency. What you are is what you are. That's what you're signing up for. If you're an all-females team, you should be only for females. If you're an all-male team, you should be only for males. And so we see the debate of, okay, well, what about a female kicker on the football team? In my approach, I think it's only fair because men deserve single-sex spaces just in the same way that women do. And so I think it's something to be explored, figuring out what this looks like specifically for your school district, because again, no one should be denied opportunities to compete, regardless of who you are, regardless of any identity factor. I'm the biggest proponent for everyone to play sports, and I certainly want those girls to be able to achieve scholarships and go on to continue their athletic career. But again, I just don't see a way where we can prioritize safety and fairness. And we've seen in many cases now, especially in field hockey, we saw it down here in Massachusetts where a young girl playing at Dighton Rehoboth had all of her teeth knocked out by a boy. He slapped a shot, hit her in the face, had to undergo facial reconstruction surgery to literally reconstruct her jaw, her face. We've seen multiple injuries in volleyball. A young girl in North Carolina, boy jumps up, he hits the ball, hits her in the head. The ball was moving at like 1,000 miles an hour. She was immediately knocked unconscious. Still to this day, this was in September of 2022, so almost 2 years ago now. She has partial paralysis on her right side, weekly doctor's appointments. Her memory is impaired, her vision is impaired. She was supposed to play softball in college. Now she couldn't. That ruined not only the rest of her volleyball season, it ruined the rest of her athletic career. And no one knows this yet, but she has to have her pituitary gland removed from her brain because of this injury. So I just don't see a space where we can prioritize inclusion over fairness and safety.
So whether it's like men thinking they're women, women thinking they're men, or like insane Hamas supporters, what do you think like young people can do to help fix America?
For sure.
That's a
whole
tall question.
lot. I love this question because ultimately it is up to us to fix America. It's our future that's at stake, which is why it's crucial and necessary that we find our voices. And why I started with saying it makes me so excited to see young people here, because truly it really does. What we should see, what we need to see from young people is just the willingness to have their conversation. In so many scenarios I have been in, I have people come up to me, whether it's on college campuses, what have you, where they come up almost in secrecy and they say, thank you for doing what you're doing. You know, I could never say something. I was assigned an English, or a paper in my English class, and I chose to totally disavow what I actually think because I didn't want to get a bad grade, but thank you for doing what you do. And it upsets me because the arrows and the slings, again, it's merely name calling. That's what we do in like second grade, is call each other names. That's what we're up against. It's really not that scary. It's easy to stand firm in the fact that, I guess on this topic specifically, when it's so clear what is right. It's so clear what is moral and just and fair and ethical. And that's that there are two sexes. Each sex is deserving of equal opportunity, safety, and privacy, and that you can't change your sex. So I think as young people, we need to be more firm. What we've seen in recent trends are young men are trending more conservative, as history has shown us, and it's young women who tend to be more liberal, who embrace this idea of inclusivity and diversity and being welcoming and accepting. But again, that's a facade. This other side, again, the side that often protests me, do not believe them when they say they are welcoming. I have never been welcomed by this other side. They say they embrace diversity. Never once have they embraced my diverse thought. They are the most, and what I've seen, again, my own personal experience, intolerant group of people hiding behind this word of tolerant. That could not be further from the truth. I think we have the conversation in a way that's civil. That's something that this nation is suffering from, is we've lost the ability to have civil discourse. We've lost the ability to think for ourselves. We've lost the willingness and the ability to admit when we're wrong. All things I think young people can and should do. And approach it with grace. I mean, we can approach the conversation with grace and empathy and without abandoning the truth. That's what our Savior does so well. You can read 1 John and see how he does, right? With the adulterous woman who was sent to be stoned. Jesus approaches the soldiers and he says, those who haven't sinned, cast the first stone, to which none of them can do. They're all sinners. We all are sinners. that was Jesus displaying grace. But what people often forget, what our world often forgets, is how he finishes with the truth, and he tells the adulterous woman, now go and sin no more. And that's his perfect balance of grace and truth, something we could all learn from, especially young people.
Let me pause for a moment. Thank you. To add to the list of constabulary, I failed to mention one of our own, who is also here, Chautauqua County Sheriff Josh, who's in the lobby there. So thank you, Josh, for coming.
Thanks a lot for being here. In my opinion, you're the women's rights advocate of our generation, and so I just want to say thank you again. I think part of my problem is I have a lot of smart friends who, when they hear your name or people who think like we do, they immediately devolve to transphobe or she hates trans people. So what do you think is the most effective, you kind of touched on it in your previous response, but the most effective way to reframe it from, oh, she's a transphobe, to this is why I think what I think?
I think, and this is something that I've really tried to develop a strategy of, and something that I feel like I try to implement on my day-to-day life in talking about this topic, is showcasing how this is harming women, how this is harming children, how this movement is harming parental rights. This is not, like I said, I guess in how I addressed Representative Lee at Congress, it's like, look, this is not a stand. I'm not standing against people who identify as trans. That's not what this is about. No, it's about maintaining the hard-earned rights that people like my grandmother fought for. That's what we're maintaining here. And so I very much try and approach this topic as a pro-woman, a pro-safeguarding of children, pro-parental rights, and that kind of manner. And that's what I've seen, that's the most effective way. It's never been on the wrong side of history to defend women. We have a whole political party right now. It cracks me up every day on Twitter or on X. Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or the POTUS account are posting about abortion and women's rights and trusting women. Donald Trump doesn't do that. How in the world can you claim to trust something that you can't even define? It's like you guys are a bunch of virtue signaling losers, actually. So don't believe them when they say they are the party for women. Again, they can't even define what one is. So I think that's how we handle this. I've seen some people, some conservatives. What I spend a lot of my time doing actually is teaching lawmakers how to talk about this, because we'll see Republicans get on the House floor and they'll say, this is a person with a mental illness. I'm not here to say yes or no to that. Besides the point, that's not an effective way in persuading anyone on our side. What we are doing here is standing up for women, we're standing up for children, we're standing up for parents.
To follow up on that, you would think women's rights advocates of all stripes would be resoundingly in favor of your cause. But a lot of them aren't speaking up. And I've asked a lot of people, including someone who's here today, why not? The unanimous answer I get is, I don't know, I can't figure it out. I've come up with an answer, and you've convinced me of it today. But I'll see what you think of this. The answer is they're afraid. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid of being treated in exactly the ways you've pointed out today. They're afraid of the very sort of fill in the blank with whatever word fits that other people have endured. Is that right? Or is there more
100%.
to that?
No, 100%. I think that addressing specifically the feminist movement, I've been utterly unimpressed with groups like the National Organization of Women, right? This is the group that wears the hats and did burn the bras and all the stuff. They really are the ones who fought for Title IX. I mean, the leading feminist group for 50, 60, 70 years, whatever it is. They just released an article recently that called me a white supremacist patriarchist. I don't even know what that means. Another time I was testifying before Congress, I was sat next to the president of the National Women's Law Center, the leading law center for women's rights issues. And in her opening testimony, she said that women should just learn how to lose more gracefully to men. And I'm sitting there listening to this, I'm like, you call yourself a feminist? You just said I should learn how to just bow my head and allow Will Thomas, to stand atop the podium. And let me just step aside so he can have all the photo snaps and take the trophy. That's what she told me. Even people like Billie Jean King, who we have to accredit, that's who we have to accredit Title IX to. She played in the battle of the sexes and she won, and it was this incredible feat for women, and it propagated women forward, not just in sports, but as a whole in the workplace. I mean, it was a huge feat for women. Billie Jean King is now actively fighting for male inclusion in women's sports and women's spaces. So the feminist group has been less than satisfactory, I will say. There are some groups people who call themselves lifelong liberals, who have stuck to their original intent, and have been firm on saying, look, men cannot be lesbians, men cannot be women, men cannot infiltrate into our bathrooms, that kind of thing, but few and far between. But majority of people, feminists or not, are silent. People who have been impacted in the same way that I did at that national championships, who are terrified. They're terrified, and understandably so. I'm not here to blame them or reprimand them, because I understand. Again, I understand the risk that they say. I understand the threats that they say exist, but it's not true. It's not true. Like they told me I wouldn't get into dental school. I got into dental school, but when I ultimately made the decision that, a week before I was, it was all to commence, I called my dental school and I said, hey, something, I was so vague because I was so scared. And I said, hey, something personal in my life has come up. I can't continue on with dental school right now. And they said, Riley, we know who you are. We know what you do. And they said, we love what you do. We will hold your spot. We will hold your deposit, the money that you've paid for whenever you want to come back. You have a spot here. I haven't lost any friends. It's not to say I don't have friends who don't disagree with me. They do, but they know me. They know my heart. They know that I have a servant's heart, that I'm even still, not to even boast on that stuff. I still give a lot of my time to my community. I'm the Special Olympics swim coach. I love doing stuff like that. They know me. I haven't lost a single friend. I haven't lost a single family member. None of that. It's what they want you to believe will happen. But the support that I've received, tenfold. Even getting out to the airport today, I landed in Buffalo. Paul was out there to pick me up. He's calling me. I couldn't get out of the airport because so many people had stopped me to say, thank you for doing what you're doing. Asked, can I take a picture with you? That's everywhere I go. So the support that I receive is tenfold anything negative, and don't believe them when they try and scare you and tell you all these bad things will happen. That has not proven true in my life.
Final question.
As a professional athlete, do you think it's possible for there to be trans divisions in non-physical contact sport or non-physical sports?
Another debate that we see often. At first, I'll tell you, I've kind of changed my mind on this, because at first I thought, absolutely, let's have a third category where people who identify as something other than what they actually are can compete. It's a way, again, everyone is afforded athletic opportunity. Everyone is afforded a chance to succeed, to be safe, fairness, equal opportunity, all those things. But what we have seen, again, time and time again, whether it's cycling, who created a third category, whether it's swimming, at the international Olympic level creating a third category. At every international meet so far, not a single person has competed in this open category. And it's because even what Thomas's reason is, it's not a satisfactory compromise to him. He says, if I can't identify or compete in the category in which I identify, in which I wholeheartedly believe that I am, then I don't want to compete at all. So it got me thinking about it more. And now I don't believe a third category is really an effective solution for a couple reasons. One of which, if you had a third category, okay, if fairness and safety still matter, which they do, for every single person, whether you identify as trans or not, okay, then do you further break it down between a category of men who identify as women and women who identify as men? Because if you don't, you're still going to have men competing against women. So the problem isn't really fixed. So do you further break it down? Okay, then do you even further break it down between men who began puberty blockers before puberty, men who take puberty blockers after puberty? I think really what it is, we're still pandering to an identity factor, and sports are the one place you go where you abandon every identity. You don't look at race when you're playing sports. You don't look at what religion you practice when you're playing sports. You abandon those things. And so I think to have a category based solely on an identity factor, it goes against what sports were created to do. They're supposed to be unifying, bringing people together. I think the solution was what has been in front of us for half a century now. Men compete against men, women compete against women.
Ladies and gentlemen, Riley Gaines.